Hey everyone, it's great to see you all again. Buying photography gear can sometimes become very stressful and overwhelming, making what's supposed to be a fun and exciting experience feel like quite the opposite. Especially when there's so much gear out there trying to tell you that it's the best, it may be hard to even know where to start. So in today's video, we are not only going to go over my personal photography setup, including my camera, different lenses that I use for unique situations, filters, tripod, and more, but we'll also go through gear that I would recommend at various price points and different configurations so you're ready for any photography situation you find yourself in. I hope you all enjoy. Now, what most of you may not know is that alongside landscape photography, I actually started my journey as an automotive photographer. So I'll be sharing my gear of choice for that side of photography as well. I'd also like to mention that we are only going to be discussing Sony E-Mount cameras and lenses because that's what I shoot on. However, equivalent lens focal lengths and cameras can be found with most other brands. So let's start with the lightweight or budget landscape photography setup. And this setup is actually going to be fairly similar to the one that I use with a slight little tweak. So the camera of choice for this setup is going to be the Sony A7 II. Now coming in at $1,000 new and at about $450 used, this mirrorless full frame Sony camera packs an absolute punch when it comes to image quality and performance. Being that it's 10 years old, this absolutely can be used to achieve professional results. And I have been using this camera for about 7 months and can't recommend it anymore. Now the first lens we are going to be talking about is the Zeiss FE 16-35 f4 lens. Now there is an f2.8 Sony version that we are going to be talking about, but I'll discuss the differences and the reason why I prefer the f4 versions a little bit later. As far as specs go, it has a 72mm filter size. The dimensions are 3.07 by 3.88 inches, and at maximum length it's actually 4.47 inches, and the weight is about 18.27 ounces or 518 grams. Now, like I said, I've been using this lens for as long as I've been doing landscape photography, and it is an absolutely amazing lens, especially for the price. Using a wide angle lens like this allows you to capture wide vistas or an interesting foreground element leading up to your background. However, one downside to wide angle lenses is that there is a lot to compose. A lot of sky, whether that be a lot of background or a lot of foreground, it can sometimes become very complicated, and if not everything meshes together really well, sometimes your photo can be lacking something. So that's why in this pack we are going to have the Tamron 28-200 f2.8 to 5.6 for Sony E-Mount. Now this is a lens that I used to have, and as you'll see in my personal setup, I sold it. However, I'm going to get my hands on one as soon as I can. This used to be my main lens, and I actually, when I started out, I just had this lens that I took car photography and landscape photography on, and it is an absolutely amazing lens. Going from 28-200, Tamron did an amazing job keeping the image quality, especially at the telephoto end of the focal length. Like I mentioned before, this used to be my main lens, and even still today would be if I didn't sell it. And if you just wanted one lens for every situation, I would say get this lens. This allows you to create wide angle photos, whether you do a panorama at the 28mm end of things, or zoom all the way into 200 at the telephoto end so you can take specific detail shots of your scene. And at an aperture like f2.8, this allows you to get an entry into the astrophotography world of photography as well. Now, as far as specs go, this does not have image stabilization. The filter size is 67mm, and the dimensions are going to be 2.91 by 4.6 inches, and at maximum extension, it is 6.78 inches. And the weight of this lens is going to be 1.27 pounds or 575.5 grams. Now that brings this setup to a total of about $1,500 used and at about $2,000 new. Now again, if that is also a little bit too much for your budget, just go with the Tamron 28-200 and start shooting. Now moving on to my personal photography setup, starting with the camera, I also have the Sony A7 II. It is a wonderful full frame camera. I also have the Zeiss 16 to 35 f4 lens, as we talked about. And like I said before, I'm going to get my hands on the Tamron 28 to 200 as soon as I can. Now, the lens that I have in addition to the budget setup is the Sigma 100 to 400 f5 to f6.3 contemporary lens. Now, coming in at a 67mm filter size, 3.39 by 7.76 inches, or at maximum length, it is 10.92 inches. It is going to weigh about 2.5 pounds or 1,130 grams. Now, that may seem like a lot, but as you may have seen in my Yosemite vlog, this is all that I used for the most part, and it allows you to be less condition dependent and really focus on the details of your scene. I absolutely love using the 100 to 400, and it is slowly becoming my favorite lens to use. For my personal setup is going to be about $3,650 new or about $2,100 used. Now, I also mentioned that I'd be talking about the automotive photography side of things. So if you wanted to get into that, I would actually suggest the Sony A6400. It's even more of a budget lens, and it is actually an APS-C, meaning crop sensor camera, meaning that it's going to crop into your photo more than a full frame. But paired with the Sigma 30mm f1.4 prime lens, I couldn't recommend this more. Now, this Sigma prime lens comes in at about $289, which for the price, absolutely amazing. I use this with a polarizer, especially when doing cars, to cut out reflections, and this is an incredibly sharp lens, especially all the way stopped down to f1.4. I also pair this with my 16 to 35 to get interior shots of the car sometimes, or more of a wide angle perspective. But moving on, I also use the Ulanzi TT09 travel tripod, which supports f38 quick release plates, which I can pair that with my Felcam horizontal to vertical half cage mount and just clip it right on there. I have an entire video reviewing that. If you want to check it out, I'll have it linked up here. I also pair that with my Peak Design camera clip, which I cannot recommend more for on-location hiking. It is so easy just to unclip the quick release plate, take some photos, or hook it onto your tripod. And I've used this with my 100 to 400 lens and nothing has gone wrong at all. It is sturdy and it keeps your camera safe on location rather than having to swing your backpack over, take out your camera, your lens, shoot the shot, and then put everything back. It is so easy and simple, and I would definitely recommend this product. Now, as far as my vlog camera, I'm actually recording on that right now. It is the DJI Pocket 2 mini camera. It shoots in 4K up to 60 FPS or at 180p at 120 FPS. It also has time-lapse mode, hyperlapse mode, along with slow motion. I will probably end up doing a review on the Pocket 2 and why I've been using it. It is so convenient to stick in your pocket, hence the name, and take anywhere you go, especially when you're traveling. So moving on to the very last setup, and this is going to be the money is no object setup, the best of the best. We are going to start off with the Sony A7 IV, which coming at a price tag of about $2,500 new and $2,000 used. It is going to bring the best image quality as well as sharpness. However, again, with that price tag, it's hard to justify it, especially if you're just starting out. I would definitely not recommend going with this camera. Now, with the image quality of this being slightly sharper than the F4, I don't know if it justifies the $2,300 price tag new or the $1,750 used price. Now, this lens actually does not have any image stabilization. The filter size is 82 millimeters. The dimensions are 3.5 by 4.4 inches, and the weight is 1.2 pounds or 547 grams, which is actually 29 grams heavier than the F4 version. And unless you're doing any sort of astrophotography where you need to stop all the way down to f2.8, to me, this lens isn't very justifiable unless you really have the money to buy it. Now, moving on to our mid-range lens, it is going to be the Sony FE 24-70 f2.8 G Master. Again, image quality is going to be top notch. Now the mid-range lens comes in at about $1,700 new and $1,200 used. However, again, it does not have any image stabilization. The filter size is 82 millimeters. The dimensions are 3.5 by 4.7 inches, and at maximum extension, it's going to be 6 inches. And the weight is 1.5 pounds or 695 pounds. So just those two lenses alone is going to be at about 3 pounds, which if you're hiking or doing any sort of long walk, it's going to be very heavy to carry that in any sort of bag along with your camera, tripod, and any other gear that you have with you. And then for our telephoto lens in this category, we are going to have the Sony FE100 to 400 millimeter f4.5 to 5.6 G Master lens. Now, if you recall, I did rent this lens in Yosemite and it is an absolutely amazing lens. However, I do not know if it justifies the $2,500 price tag new or the $1,600 used price tag. Now, the image quality being a little bit sharper than the Sigma version of this lens, I personally would not recommend this lens, and I would very much recommend the Sigma 100 to 400 if we're talking about telephoto lenses. Bringing the total cost to $9,000 new or about $6,550 used. Not only is this going to be the most expensive setup, but it's going to be the heaviest setup by quite a bit. To get those specs in those cameras, they're going to have to be pretty heavy. So if you're going on any sort of long trip or traveling with those lenses, you're going to have to keep that in mind. Other than that, I hope you all learned something from today's video, and this kind of gives you a starting point for when you're looking for gear as a landscape photographer. But if you could subscribe to my weekly newsletter, I will be posting weekly updates. I would greatly appreciate it. I also have print sales and galleries up on my website if you want to take a look at my portfolio. And for daily updates, if you can like and follow my Facebook page. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.